focus of this training module is to introduce the proper tools and to provide instructions for successful application of clear glaze using the dipping process. These instructions are specific to Dunkin' Clear dipping glazes. First, let's talk about the tools you'll need to glaze successfully. Be sure to select a tank that will hold enough glaze to submerge your largest ceramic piece. Generally, a 25-gallon capacity tank with 15 gallons of glaze in it will work great. The tank must also have a large enough opening and enough depth to easily submerge the piece without touching the sides or bottom of the tank. Touching the sides or bottom can smear underglazes or create glaze starvation in those areas that touch the tank. It is recommended that the tank have a lid that can be adequately secured to help prevent contamination and evaporation of the glaze. You should drain and clean your dipping tank regularly. We recommend every 6 months or when contamination has occurred. A sieve is a great tool used to strain glaze prior to filling a dipping tank. They are also helpful when removing any contaminants while performing periodic glaze tank maintenance and cleaning procedures. Power mixers need to be used with care, especially when being used to mix a non-toxic glaze. Overmixing of the glaze can cause the glaze solids to separate and settle. Overmixing is defined as mixing too long or mixing with a mixer that rotates at a very high rate of speed. Powered mixers are best when used to initially mix the glaze after purchase. When using a powered mixer in dipping tanks, be careful not to touch the sides or bottom of tank with mixing blades. Particles from the tank can be released into the glaze. These particles can cause dark or black specks on the finished ceramic pieces that may have been undetected before firing. Hand mixers can be used more often than powered mixers without negative effects on the glaze. Hand mixers are best when used on a daily basis for proper glaze management. A restaurant-grade stainless steel wire whisk is recommended. Used with a stopwatch to time the flow of the glaze, viscosity cups can be used to measure thickness of glaze. A standard can be set to guide the novice dipper to the same viscosity consistently. The recommended range is a starting point. The individual managing the operation must set the standard within the range. This is to allow for the different dipping techniques being applied, as well as the different climates where the product is used. The temperature of the glaze can influence the reading. Always be sure to rinse the viscosity cup immediately after use to ensure accurate readings. Dipping tongs can be used to submerge an entire piece into the glaze to increase efficiency in the glazing process. No double dipping is required. Care should be taken with pieces that are decorated with underglaze on the majority of the piece so that the tongs will not create blemishes on the design. Heavier or larger pieces that are difficult to handle with the tongs should be dipped by hand. A palette knife can be used to shave down drip marks or areas where excessive glaze has been applied to facilitate even glaze application. This eliminates the need for finger sanding and minimizes dust. A fan brush can be used to touch up tong marks or apply more glaze to areas that glaze has repelled from due to hard spots or foreign substances on bisque. Baker's racks are recommended to store painted pieces on prior to transporting them to the dipping area for preparation of dipping and kiln loading. Once the pieces have been dipped, a drying rack can be used to dry the pieces before loading into the kiln. Now that we have all the tools we'll need, let's talk about the clear glaze application process. First, make sure the dipping area is clean and free of clutter. Also, make sure the dipping tank is clean and free of dust or other debris. When you first open a bucket of clear glaze, mix with the electric mixer for no more than 2 minutes until you see a vortex. Avoid touching edges of pail with the mixing blade and do not overmix. Pour glaze into the dipping tank. Stack the empty glaze buckets near the dipping tank and store your backroom tools such as your whisk and viscosity cup inside them. This way, you have a convenient method of keeping track of the lot numbers of clear glazes inside your dipping tank in case an issue arises. Next, you should check the viscosity by submerging a viscosity cup into the tank and filling it with glaze. As you lift the cup from the glaze, begin timing. Stop timing when the steady stream of glaze begins to break. A range of 19 to 24 seconds is normal. You can add small amounts of water as needed to thin. Before glazing, decide which method of dipping is best. If the piece is heavy, large, or completely covered with underglazes, dipping by hand may be preferable. Otherwise, you may choose to dip with dipping tongs. You'll want to hold the piece at an angle, which allows you to manage the flow of the glaze. Use a smooth, casual motion to submerge bisque in glaze, covering approximately 90% of the piece. Quickly lift ware out of glaze and shake it off to remove excess glaze and achieve uniform application. We recommend shaking the glaze off as much as possible while the piece is still wet so that you have less work to do later with dremeling or touch-ups. Be cautious of pieces that have areas where glaze tends to pool. Every piece may have a slightly different glazing method. Once it appears dry, gently hold the glazed area while dipping the remaining 10%. You can slightly overlap the glazed portions. Then let the piece dry completely. If you choose to dip with dipping tongs, gently grasp bisque with the tongs and submerge in glaze, covering the entire piece. Then, quickly lift ware out of glaze and shake to remove excess glaze and achieve uniform application. Then let piece dry completely. Once the pieces are dry, check them for drips and coverage. The entire piece should be glazed. If you notice any glaze drips on the pieces, you can use a palette knife to shave them off. You may need to use a fan brush to touch up any tong marks or missed areas with glaze. Be sure to wait until the piece is dry before touching up. In this video, we reviewed the necessary tools, glaze preparation, and the steps for proper clear glaze application using the dipping process. Up next, the kiln loading and firing process.